The blizzard had passed, but the forest still held its breath. Fresh snow blanketed the slopes of northern British Columbia, muffling the sounds of a world that had just endured nature's fury. Trees bent under the weight of white silence. The sun broke timidly through the clouds, casting long shadows across a clearing scarred by struggle. And in the center of that stillness lay a pup. Barely 8 weeks old, the wolf cub had collapsed beside the frozen carcass of a cow elk, likely the last desperate kill his fractured pack had made before scattering in the storm. The pup's coat, a mottled mix of ash gray and winter white, was matted with snow and blood. One paw was twisted at an unnatural angle. His breathing came in shallow bursts. Rescuers from a local wildlife patrol found him after receiving reports of strange sounds echoing near the trailhead. What they expected to be a scavenging coyote turned out to be something far more fragile. He didn't resist when they approached. His golden eyes were open, alert, but empty. No growl, no snarl. Just surrender. They named him Luno. At the Aurora Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, nestled between glacial hills and pine forests, Luno was given warmth, food, and a second chance. Dr. Camille Anders, the center's lead veterinarian, was the first to examine him. She'd seen countless orphaned cubs in her 15-year career, some feral with fear, others clinging to human contact as a substitute for their missing kin. But Luno was different. "He's not just weak," Camille had murmured to her assistant after that first exam. "He's waiting for something that isn't coming back." The pup's leg was treated. His body mended faster than expected. But the mind? That was another matter. He refused to eat unless coaxed. He rarely barked or howled, never played, and often faced the wall of his enclosure for hours on end. At night, staff would find him curled in the exact same spot, head low between his front paws, as if hoping the snow would return and hide him again. Tomas Vega, the center's longtime director, watched the monitors one late evening, sipping cold coffee and rubbing at his temples. "We've got a healthy wolf with no will to live," he muttered. "And wolves don't survive alone." He was right. Wolves are born into bonds. Into touch, sound, scent. A pack is not just protection or hunting efficiency, it's identity. And without it, Luno was dissolving into something ghost-like. There were no other wolf pups at the center. None nearby either. They called other rescue operations, sanctuaries, even zoos. Nothing. Luno was alone, in every way that mattered. And the clock was ticking. Each day that passed chipped away at what little fire remained in him. By week's end, Camille began to consider the unthinkable, releasing Luno into a long-term care enclosure not with other wolves, but in complete solitude. A last resort? But nature, as it often does, had other ideas. The Aurora Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was no stranger to long shots. Nestled between the backcountry trails of the Columbia Icefield and the boreal hush of protected wilderness, it had taken in everything from injured caribou to wayward porcupines. But wolves were different. You couldn't fake a pack, not to them, not for long. In her office overlooking the snowy courtyard, Dr. Camille Anders sat surrounded by charts, enrichment plans, and unanswered emails. She stared at the feeding log, Luno, day 12, ate 40% with encouragement. No vocalizations. No play. Not enough. Not fast enough. And the edges of hope were wearing thin. That's when Tomas knocked. "Got a call," he said, voice calm but eyes sparking with something she hadn't seen in days. "Idaho. Cedar Bluff Sanctuary. They've got a candidate." Camille looked up from her tablet. "Another wolf pup?" Tomas shook his head. "No. A bobcat." There was a pause, long and heavy. "A bobcat?" Camille repeated slowly, as if the word might rearrange itself into something more reasonable. 6 weeks old. Male. Orphaned when a logging operation disturbed his den. Mother never came back. Healthy, but under-socialized. He needs contact. Fast. Camille's brow furrowed. "Tomas, wolves and bobcats don't even share territory without conflict in the wild. And that's assuming they even notice each other before one runs or one attacks." Tomas leaned forward, elbows on the doorframe. I know. It's a mismatch. But remember the cougar cub and the Labrador back in 2017? No one thought that would work either. But it did. For a while. That cougar weighed 20 pounds. This wolf could be 100 when grown. They're both babies now. Silence. Camille looked toward the hallway that led to the nursery wing, where Luno lay curled in a room full of warmth, but no life. We'd have to be surgical about it, she said. Glass partition first. Slow introductions. Full monitoring. The first sign of predatory instinct, we separate. Tomas nodded. Of course. This isn't permanent. It's intervention. Just until Luno stabilizes. Camille stared out the window. Snow had begun to fall again, light, almost hesitant, like the earth wasn't quite sure if it was ready for another storm. What's the bobcat's name? She asked quietly. Tomas smiled. Nova. 3 days later, a battered transport van arrived in the early hours of dawn. The engine steamed as it idled near the loading bay. Out stepped a woman in a heavy parka with feathers stitched to the shoulders, a subtle nod to her Blackfeet heritage. Tina Black Elk. She introduced herself. Wildlife tech, an unofficial babysitter to this little beast. They opened the rear doors. Inside, in a reinforced carrier, crouched a bobcat the size of a house cat, but with paws too big for his body, tufted ears that flicked at every sound, and wide, amber eyes that held the wild like embers waiting to flare. He hissed once. Then sniffed. Then sat. Meet Nova, Tina said, tone affectionate but cautious. He's vocal, he's fast, and he's got zero patience for car rides. Camille crouched near the crate, watching as Nova watched her. He's beautiful, she murmured, reaching no further. Any social behavior? Minimal. We bottle-fed, checked vitals, gave space. No humans beyond basic care. Plan was always to rewild him once the snow melts. Tina paused. He needs feline socialization before that. But our other bobcats are adults. Territorial. He can't stay. The team had prepared a small transition room next to Luno's. Soundproofed, but with a clear plexiglass panel. 2 species. 2 orphans. 2 separate worlds, meeting through nothing more than sight and scent. Tina carried the crate in, opened the door, and waited. Nova didn't bolt. He didn't slink either. He stepped out with quiet calculation, nose twitching, tail low but loose. He padded to the far corner, sat, and stared at the door. Waiting. Camille made a note. Alert. Cautious. No sign of distress. Then they brought in Luno. The wolf pup hadn't moved all morning. His food bowl was untouched. Camille lifted him gently, he barely resisted, and carried him to the observation window between the 2 rooms. At first, nothing. Luno's eyes were flat. His ears limp. Then Nova turned. For a moment, both animals stared. Still. Silent. Then Luno's ears twitched. His head tilted, just slightly. His gaze locked onto the small, spotted creature on the other side of the glass. And something flickered. Not recognition. Not joy. But curiosity. A seed of something that hadn't stirred in days. Camille lowered him slowly back to the bedding, heart pounding in cautious rhythm. She turned to Tina. Well, she said quietly, I guess introductions have begun. The next few days passed like a held breath. Each morning, Camille or a handler would carry Luno to the window and let him watch Nova from across the glass. No physical contact, no sudden movements, no pressure. Just sight lines and silence. At first, the bobcat ignored the wolf pup completely. He explored the edges of his space like a creature auditioning escape routes, his nose pressed to corners, his eyes scanning for loopholes. But slowly, curiosity replaced anxiety. By day 2, Nova had started lingering near the glass. Luno, for his part, was no longer turned inward. He sat up when Nova approached. His ears perked. His head followed Nova's movements. A subtle wag of his tail began to return, not playful, not excited, but present. Awake. It's like they're circling a language neither of them speaks, Camille observed on the third morning, arms crossed as she watched through the security feed. But somehow they're both listening. Tomas, standing beside her, nodded. Whatever's happening, it's better than silence. But nature is rarely patient with plans. On the fourth night, long after staff had finished evening rounds and the center lights dimmed to their soft night glow, the security alarm blinked yellow. Camille was still in her office, out of habit more than duty, when the alert buzzed. She clicked through to the enclosure feed expecting a false motion trigger. What she saw made her sit bolt upright. Nova was no longer in his room. The little Bobcat had found a flaw in the ventilation system, a narrow shaft overlooked during enclosure retrofitting. Cameras caught him slipping through the slats with feline precision and vanishing from view. 37 minutes later, another camera picked him up, inside Luno's enclosure. By the time Camille arrived in person, the monitors already told the story. There, in the heated bedding at the far end of the room, Luno was curled on his side, and tucked against his belly, paws stretched across the wolf's thick fur, was Nova, fast asleep. The Bobcat twitched once in his sleep, ears flicking. Luno let out a sound Camille hadn't heard before. Not a growl. Not a whimper. It was, almost a sigh. They found each other, she whispered. Behind her, Tomas arrived breathless, holding a coffee mug still half full. He took one look at the scene and exhaled. Well, he said softly. Guess the introductions went ahead of schedule. They debated what to do. Protocol demanded separation. The risk was real, these were predators, after all. But something about the way Nova had burrowed in against Luno's side, the gentle rise and fall of their breathing, the total absence of tension or fear. Camille made the call. We monitor through the night. Any shift in behavior, we intervene immediately. But if this is helping... She trailed off. She didn't need to finish. By morning, the two were still together. Still breathing in rhythm. Still touching. Still whole. And something had changed in Luno. His coat looked glossier. His posture straighter. When Camille entered the room to clean and refresh supplies, he actually lifted his head. When she placed the food bowl, he sniffed, then ate, on his own. No coaxing. No games. Nova remained nearby, watching but never interfering. As if he knew. He's not just a comfort, Camille told Tomas later that day. He's a mirror. Luno sees him, and remembers that he's alive. Tomas smiled, then looked at the shared footage on the tablet screen. Luno standing slowly, sniffing the bedding, Nova batting gently at a toy mouse nearby. It's strange, he murmured. One is meant to lead a pack. The other's born to live alone. But maybe, what they needed first was each other. By the end of the first week, Luno was no longer the same pup they had rescued from the snow. He still walked with a slight limp, residue from his injury. But his body had begun to fill out. His eyes, once dulled and distant, now tracked movement with keen alertness. He approached handlers without fear. He explored his space. He played. And he ate. Every meal. But always, only if Nova was near. The Bobcat had become more than a presence. He was a constant, a heartbeat outside of Luno's own, steady and reliable. When the wolf lay down, Nova curled against his side. When Nova batted at toys or wrestled with enrichment ropes, Luno joined in, cautiously at first, then with a growing eagerness that surprised even the most seasoned staff. He's modeling behavior, Camille explained during a team meeting. But not out of mimicry, out of trust. Out of connection. Nova isn't training Luno. He's reminding him what it feels like to be curious. To feel safe. The bond was not one-sided either. Nova, born wild, raised wary, had softened. He began to tolerate touch during medical checkups. He explored more freely. When Luno growled in his sleep, Nova nudged him awake. When Nova grew too excitable, Luno would let out a low chuff that calmed them both. Their rhythms were out of sync, but somehow in sync. 2 animals. 2 instincts. 1 pulse. News of the unlikely friendship began to spread. It started with a post, an offhand photo taken by one of the junior handlers, captioned simply, "A wolf pup who forgot how to live, and a bobcat who reminded him." Within days, the post was shared by a popular wildlife blog, then a regional conservation magazine, then an online education network. Donations to the Aurora Center tripled in under a week. Camille watched the numbers rise with quiet ambivalence. The attention was good, vital, even for future programs. But the cubs didn't know they were going viral. They only knew each other. And that, Camille reminded everyone, must remain the center's first priority. The humans made a decision: no tours, no direct contact, no media days. The friendship would not be paraded. Not yet. Instead, they documented in silence: motionless cameras, infrared tracking, quiet notes. Researchers came to study stress hormone levels. Biologists requested access to behavioral footage. Ethologists called it an interspecies attachment anomaly. But for Camille, it was simpler. He was dying. And then he wasn't. Because of Nova. A month after Nova's arrival, the center hosted a small outreach event for local schools. No animals on display, just conservation education and storytelling. One child, a pale-faced girl with bright eyes beneath a knit cap, approached Camille at the end of the session. She didn't speak right away. She just held out a hand-drawn picture, crayon lines shaky but sincere. It showed a big gray wolf with a crooked smile, and a spotted bobcat riding on its back, tail flying like a flag. Above them were 5 awkwardly shaped stars and a speech bubble that read, "You helped me feel brave at the hospital." Camille blinked twice before answering. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl smiled behind her mask. "Avery," she said. "But I like Nova better." That night, Camille walked the grounds alone. Snow fell in slow spirals, catching the warm light from the nursery windows. Inside, the 2 cubs were curled together, Luna larger now, Nova nestled along the curve of his belly, their fur rising and falling like matching waves. Camille stood for a long time before she turned to leave. She didn't need the monitors to know they were breathing easy. She could feel it. In the silence, there was healing. By the time spring thawed the last of the mountain ice, everyone knew their names. Nova and Luno had become more than just animals. They were symbols of healing, of hope, of something raw and real in a world increasingly synthetic. Their story had rippled outward. Schoolchildren sent letters, a national wildlife journal published a cover feature, and a quiet documentary crew had started to gather footage under Camille's supervision. The public adored them. But science doesn't always follow sentiment. Inside the weekly staff meeting, the mood had shifted. No longer just updates on feeding or weight gain. The questions had changed. When are we beginning Luno's reintegration training? Have we modeled future stress scenarios if they're separated? Can Nova still be considered a release candidate after prolonged cohabitation with another species? Camille listened. Then exhaled. This isn't just data anymore. It's relationship. Dr. Damien Keller, a visiting zoologist from the Federal Rewilding Division, shook his head with professional concern. "Camille, he's a wolf. He'll never form proper dominance hierarchies if he doesn't learn social cues from his own kind. And Nova, he's supposed to be wild. Not a companion species." Tomas spoke up, voice calm but firm. "And if we separate them now and Luno regresses? Or Nova refuses rewilding entirely?" The room was silent. There were no easy answers. Just risks, probabilities, and protocols. They agreed on one thing: they had to try something. A transition. A test. That's when the name Celaya entered the conversation. Celaya was a yearling female wolf from a wildlife center in Alberta, born in captivity after her mother was rescued while pregnant. Healthy, alert, and accustomed to controlled environments. She'd been recommended as a potential, socializing companion for Luno. Camille was hesitant. "One wrong move and this could shatter the progress we've made." But she also knew that Nova couldn't teach Luno everything. Wolves need wolves to learn the language of wolves. So they built a plan: short, supervised introductions. Luno and Celaya would meet, but Nova would be present, for comfort, for control, and to gauge reactions. The first meeting was a tension wire. Celaya entered the adjacent enclosure first, light on her paws, head held high, tail neutral. She sniffed the space, picked up traces of Luno, but showed no sign of distress. Then came Luno. He stood behind the gate, ears forward, body alert. Nova was already inside, perched on a high branch in the corner, watching like a sentinel. The gate slid open. Luno stepped forward, then paused. Celaya turned. Their eyes locked. A long moment passed. No growling. No lunging. Just a slow, mutual approach. Noses touched. They circled once, warily. Nova never moved. Then, surprisingly, it was Celaya who bowed first, a play signal. Luno, unsure, mirrored the motion. Nova yawned, stretched, and leapt down, sauntering between them with that cat-like indifference only bobcats possess. They didn't fight. They followed. And for the first time, Luno wasn't just watching Nova, he was watching another wolf. Camille leaned into the observation glass, barely breathing. "He's not losing Nova," she whispered. "He's expanding." Over the next weeks, supervised visits became shared spaces. Nova adjusted, sometimes independent, sometimes withdrawn, but never gone. He watched from perches. He played, occasionally. At night he still curled beside Luno, even as Celaya began to sleep nearby. The pack was forming. Odd. Uneven. Improvised. But real. "Maybe this is the future," Tomas said during a sunset walk-through one evening. "Not wild versus captive. Not natural versus artificial. Just connection. Wherever it finds a foothold." Camille didn't answer right away. She was watching the three animals through the fence, Nova lounging on a flat stone, eyes half-lidded, Celaya resting near the stream, and Luno, standing between them, tail relaxed, ears forward, looking not like a pup anymore, but a young wolf learning how to belong. Summer came, soft and slow. The highlands around the Aurora center bloomed with wild lupin and beargrass. Streams ran full with snowmelt, and the days lengthened into the golden hush of late June. The cubs, no longer cubs, had grown. Luno, now lean and muscular, moved with the self-assured grace of a maturing wolf. His gait was smoother, his gaze steadier. He hunted enrichment prey with precision, responded to cues, and had begun scent-marking his enclosure with instinctual rhythm. Celaya had become his constant companion, part sister, part rival. They played rougher now. They learned hierarchy. She challenged him, and he rose to meet it. And Nova. Nova had changed too. Not in size, he remained a compact, wiry thing, barely a third of Luno's mass, but in spirit. His wildness had returned. He no longer slept beside Luno every night. He took to the high rocks, the shadowed corners of the extended enclosure. He climbed more. Watched more. Wandered longer. Some mornings he didn't come when called. And yet, he always came back. But Camille could feel it in her bones, the way the air around him had shifted. Nova was pulling away. It was Tomas who said it first, during a quiet walk at dusk. "He's preparing himself," he murmured. "He knows." Camille didn't need clarification. Nova was ready. For the first time in a year, they discussed the reintroduction plan in earnest. The sanctuary in Idaho, the same place Nova had come from, had agreed to accept him into their pre-release program. Controlled environment. Gradual transition. A monitored wild habitat with limited human contact. The team hesitated. Was it fair? Was it right? "He was never meant to stay," Camille said softly one evening, watching Nova perch silently on the tallest rock at sunset, tail flicking like a metronome. "He came here to survive. But he stayed long enough to save someone else." The farewell wasn't scheduled. It just happened. On a misty August morning, Camille arrived early, before handlers or staff. She moved through the nursery corridor, past the old glass panel where Luno and Nova had first seen each other, now faded slightly with time and weather. The enclosure was quiet. Too quiet. Luno and Celaya were asleep under the pine overhang. But the upper ledge, Nova's favorite spot, was empty. At first, she panicked. Checked gates, vents, perimeters. Then she saw it, paw prints. Tiny, deliberate, leading to the far side of the enclosure where the staff had long ago installed a bobcat-sized access tunnel, connecting to the open mountain corridor reserved for rewilding species. It had never been closed. Nova had always known it was there. He had simply waited. Waited until Luno no longer needed him, only remembered him. 3 days passed. No sign. Then on the 4th morning, one of the trail cameras pinged. There, in a clearing half a mile beyond the sanctuary's ridge, a bobcat was caught mid-stride, coat sleek, muscles lean, ears forward, gaze locked toward the tree line. Free. Alive. Unclaimed. Camille saved the photo. Printed it. Taped it gently to the observation window. Luno approached that afternoon. He sniffed the glass, stared at the image, and then, softly, howled. Not with sorrow, but with recognition. 2 months later, the Aurora Center held a small ceremony. Nothing formal. Just the staff, a few researchers, and one special guest, Avery, now in remission, her face fuller, her eyes bright. She stood before the modest plaque beneath a newly planted pine. In honor of Nova and Luno, for teaching us that survival is not the same as living, and that family isn't always by blood or by species. Camille handed her a folded blanket, patterned with 2 animals side by side, one pawed and wild, one padded and proud. Do you miss him? Avery asked, looking up at her. Camille didn't answer right away. She looked toward the enclosure, where Luno and Celaya were chasing each other in long, looping arcs of joy. Then to the ridge beyond the center, where no fences stood. And smiled. No, she said gently. Because I know exactly where he is. The first storm of autumn rolled in heavy and dark, clouds boiling across the Oregon sky. Maya almost didn't bring Lily to the center that day. But Lily had insisted. Just a little while, Mom. Sage will be waiting. And he was. The moment the little girl hopped out of the truck, Sage rose from his usual spot by the fence, ears perked, tail flicking once in quiet greeting. It had become their ritual. Lily would sit by the enclosure, humming or sketching pictures in the dirt with a stick. Sage would watch her, close enough that the 2 shadows, wildcat and child, seemed to blend into one in the late afternoon light. It was safe. It was theirs. Until it wasn't. It happened so fast. 1 minute, Lily was chasing a paper plane she had folded and tossed into the wind, giggling as it soared beyond the enclosures, past the clearing. The next minute, she was gone. Maya turned at the sound of silence, the heavy kind that falls just before the world realizes something is wrong. The paper plane spun forgotten in the mud. No Lily. No sound. No footprints but her own, already blurred by the gathering rain. Panic punched through Maya's chest. Lily! She shouted, spinning in every direction, her voice cracking. Staff members scattered, calling, searching, sprinting toward the woods at the edge of the center. But it was Sage who moved first. The young bobcat slammed his body against the side of the enclosure, claws scrabbling for purchase. He let out a yell, sharp, guttural, primal, that echoed across the yard. Tom fumbled with the gate lock, but Maya was faster. She ripped open the catch, and Sage burst free like a shot of golden lightning. There was no hesitation. No confusion. Nose to the ground, muscles taut, Sage tore across the open field, following a scent no human nose could trace. Maya ran after him, heart in her throat, stumbling over roots and wet grass. The rescue center shrank behind them. Ahead, the woods loomed dark and hungry. Sage veered hard to the left, into a narrow trail barely wide enough for rabbits. Maya forced herself through the underbrush, branches whipping her arms and face. Up ahead she heard it. A whimper. Thin. Frightened. Mom! Maya's legs nearly gave out. She pushed harder. There, beneath the shelter of a fallen tree, curled against the cold earth, was Lily. Her ankle was twisted at an unnatural angle, her hand scraped raw where she must have fallen. But she was breathing. And Sage. Sage was already there. He crouched low beside her, body tense but still, his flank pressing gently against her small, shivering frame. Protecting. Shielding. Guarding. When Maya reached them, she fell to her knees, arms wrapping around her daughter and her daughter's unlikely protector in one trembling embrace. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, tears mingling with the rain. "You're safe now." Sage didn't move. He stayed pressed against Lily's side until the paramedics arrived, his golden eyes never leaving the dark edges of the trees. As if daring the world to try and hurt her again. Only when Lily was lifted into the ambulance, bundled in warm blankets, did Sage allow himself to be led back. Head low, muscles twitching with exhaustion. But not fear. Never fear again. News travels fast in small towns. By the next morning, the story was everywhere, whispered in the aisles of the grocery store, passed between neighbors at mailboxes, murmured over steaming cups of diner coffee. The wild bobcat, the one no one dared to touch, had saved a little girl. And not just any girl. His girl. Photographers and reporters arrived at the center within days, armed with cameras, notebooks, and polite but relentless curiosity. Tom, Maya, and the rest of the staff scrambled to create protocols. No direct contact, no flash photography, no chaos that could undo everything Sage and Lily had built. They weren't interested in making a spectacle. This was sacred. Still, the world wanted to see. They came expecting something wild, something dangerous barely contained behind bars. What they found instead was a story so quietly extraordinary it refused to be sensationalized. Each afternoon, after her short physical therapy sessions, Lily would sit by Sage's expanded enclosure. Sometimes drawing. Sometimes just humming softly. And Sage, full-grown now, powerful and sleek, would sit near the fence, his tufted ears relaxed, his amber eyes following her every movement with unwavering devotion. He didn't perform. He didn't entertain. He simply stayed. Steady. Silent. Present. Visitors spoke in hushed tones, sensing instinctively that they were witnessing something rare, something no trick or training could fabricate. A bond that had been earned, breath by breath, scar by scar. Donations poured in. Enough to upgrade the enclosures, to expand the wildlife rehabilitation wing, to fund outreach programs teaching children about respecting wild animals and understanding trauma. And through it all, Sage remained at the center. Not as a cautionary tale. Not as an exhibit. But as a living reminder that even the most wounded spirits could heal, if given the right kind of love. The town council organized a small ceremony one golden afternoon in late fall. The leaves tumbled like lazy embers around the park gazebo where Lily and Sage were honored. There was no grand fanfare. No big speeches. Just a simple plaque, placed quietly near the rescue center's entrance, engraved with words chosen by Maya herself. For Sage, who taught us that trust cannot be forced, only given. And for Lily, who gave it, without asking anything in return. Sage didn't seem to notice the plaque. He had eyes only for the little girl sitting cross-legged by the fence, coloring a new picture with crayons worn down to stubs. Another bobcat. Another girl. Another heart drawn between them. Because for Sage, the world didn't need cameras or ceremonies. His world was right there. Smiling at him through the chain link. Steady as sunrise. Certain as love. Seasons passed, slow and sure as the rivers carving the hills around Havenwood. Lily grew. So did Sage. By the time she turned 12, Lily had exchanged her crayon drawings for thick notebooks filled with sketches, bobcats, foxes, owls, each one drawn with a hand steady from years of quiet observation. She still visited Sage every day after school. Only now, he met her not as a cautious survivor, but as an old friend. Sometimes, when the staff allowed, Lily would slip inside his expanded enclosure. She never rushed. She never reached without invitation. Instead, she would sit cross-legged in the grass as she always had, letting Sage come to her in his own time. And he always did. Head low. Ears relaxed. Trust radiating from him like heat from a sunlit stone. They grew up together, in a way. Lily, the girl who once needed saving. Sage, the bobcat who once believed he could never trust again. Each teaching the other how to stay, not just survive, but truly stay, in a world that sometimes felt too sharp, too loud, too fast. The town changed too. Children on school field trips learned about Sage before they even arrived, about patience, respect, and second chances. They craned their necks for a glimpse of the spotted guardian resting under the oaks, or stretched lazily in the afternoon sun. They pointed at the plaque by the gate, and asked questions their teachers had only begun to understand. And when they learned Sage's story, something shifted behind their wide, eager eyes. An understanding. A quiet kind of hope. Time, as it always does, moved forward. By the time Lily graduated high school, Sage was older, slower. His movements were careful now, deliberate. He spent more time sleeping in the warm patches of grass, blinking slowly at the horizon like an old sailor watching the tide. But when Lily knelt by the fence, her hair now tied back, her voice lower but still filled with the same warmth, Sage would lift his head. Would blink at her once. Would rumble a low, soft greeting from deep in his chest. Still there. Still hers. The last winter came gently. There were no storms, no final battles. One morning, Sage simply curled into the softest part of his enclosure, where the late sun pooled like honey. And he slept. And when Lily came, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a new notebook in her arms, she understood without being told. She knelt by the fence, pressing her palm to the cold middle. "I love you, Sage," she whispered. "You made me brave." The bobcat's ear twitched once, as if in answer. And then the wind carried his spirit higher, lighter, freer than it had ever been before. Lily planted a small oak sapling near the spot he had loved most. She visited it often in those early months, sitting cross-legged in the grass, sketching quietly, humming under her breath. Just as she once had, long ago, when trust was something fragile, and hope was something they had both built together, one breath at a time. And sometimes, on certain golden afternoons when the light slanted just right, if you listened very closely, you could almost hear it. The whisper of a wild heart still keeping watch. Still staying. Still loving.